Hey folks, welcome into the News 12 Now Desk. Thanks for joining us. Nick Proto, Rioux here with you. On this Friday, we have made it to the end of the week, about 11 o'clock here in the CSRA. We're talking about our latest I-Team investigation that Will did yesterday. If you haven't seen it, we are going to play it here in just a second. First, though, I want to show you guys how to subscribe to our new YouTube channel. This is a great way to stay informed with what's going on in our community. We do all of our streaming on here, so if there's ever some breaking news or a live press conference, anything like that, we'll go ahead and stream it on the YouTube channel. So let me pull it up here. If you go to YouTube and you just look up this WRDW News 12 right here, you can see the little subscribe button over on the right. That's how you do it. And then look at this, we're live right now. So once this commercial finishes up, we will you'll see that we're live. So let's see here. Look at that, it's me skipping the commercial on the stream. So that is a great tool for everybody to just stay informed again. If you don't have a full 30 minutes to watch a newscast, we do a lot of shorter form stuff on there. All of our stories, all of our weather forecasts, everything like that, gonna be up there on the YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to that to stay up to date with what's going on. But okay, now we are talking about our latest I-Team investigation. Like I said, Will, why don't you give us a quick synopsis of what this is about, and then we'll play the story, come back and chat, and then we've got the full interview as well.
Yeah, just real quick, this is something that the I-Team has been following for over a year now. It's actually something that we started looking into. I actually broke the story back, I think it was in February when all of this happened. We tracked Madison Cooksey down, and we heard from her, we interviewed her, got a little bit more information, and said, wow, this seems like a bigger problem of not only her sexual assault case, but also who's looking out over our school districts to make sure that they're reporting what they're supposed to be when it comes to sexual assault or alleged sexual assaults with teachers. So that's basically what this was about, was sharing Madison's story, the new lawsuit that was filed against the school district, Scott Hooker, and the former superintendent, Sandra Caraway, at that time. And then just a little bit more about the overview of maybe what needs to change in the state.
Yeah, so a lot to uncover here, and there is a deeper timeline with this. As Will said, we've been looking into this for about a year now. So we'll play the story, talk a little bit about that timeline, kind of where we stand now and where we go moving forward. So we'll play this story. It's about 7.5 minutes. So we'll do that. We'll come out of that and we'll chat a little bit more.
Yeah, more than a year ago, the I-Team broke the story about Scott Hooker and his history with the Columbia County school system. Scott Hooker is charged with improper sexual contact, sexual battery, and simple battery. This is how just one teacher slipped through the cracks of what seems like a broken system in the state of Georgia.
This is where a pattern of alleged inappropriate behavior started with the special education teacher. Accusations date back to 2015 at Evans High School in Columbia County. But 8 years later,
it's been difficult. It's been long waiting for all of this to kind of get settled and seeing where it's all going.
The I-Team began looking into the allegations. We requested Hooker's personnel file more than a year ago. It details when and where Hooker slipped through the cracks in the Columbia County School District. In 2015, a letter from the Evans High principal to the superintendent says a student is said to have called Hooker daddy. Hooker received a written note of concern and was strongly advised to refrain from unprofessional behavior. 2 years later, in 2017, is when Madison Cooksey's alleged sexual assault happens.
1 minute I was in class, the next minute I'm in the office surrounded by police officers and my mom. And it's just a really surreal feeling knowing that 1 minute you're supposed to be in this safe environment teaching or learning from your teachers, and the next minute your whole life just kind of changes.
The Evans High principal sent a letter to Hooker after the school received a complaint from Cooksey. She accused him of side-hugging her, moving his hand down her back and touching the lower back and butt area. Hooker admitted to the school about giving the student a side hug or patting the student's back while sitting down in his chair. The principal recommended a formal letter of reprimand be placed in Hooker's personnel file. Another disciplinary action may be taken by the superintendent, Sandra Caraway. The letter states that if an incident or allegation was deemed unprofessional or if the code of ethics was violated, Hooker may be fired. 8 days later, then Superintendent Sandra Caraway sent her response to Hooker. She called his interactions with female students worrisome and said he could not be alone with or have physical contact with a female student beyond his duties. 2 months later, deputies were called to Evans High School again. Cooksey told deputies that Hooker would often cross paths with her and stand next to her while staring at her. Cooksey later transferred while Hooker continued to teach at Evans High School.
It's very, very mind-blowing that all of these things, even before my situation had happened, and it was just kind of, oh, you shouldn't do that, let's not do that anymore, that's not appropriate, instead of actions being taken in place to prevent things like this from happening again.
Hooker would send in his resignation letter at the end of the year, having accepted an administrator role at the Georgia School for Innovation and the Classics in Richmond County, where he taught for a little over a year before going to Burke County High School, where he would later be arrested.
Multiple different schools and do the same thing. I just can't even put into words how it makes me feel knowing that that was able to happen, and who knows how many other than me and the other girl who was involved who could have been a victim of his. It's ridiculous.
So the I-Team started asking questions. What exactly are the guidelines for school districts if something like this happens?
The I-Team found the Georgia Professional Standards Commission oversees any individual with a teaching certification in the state. It creates and follows a code of ethics for educators to follow while they have a certification to teach. Standard 2 talks about conduct with students. Educators should maintain a professional relationship with all students inside and outside the classroom. Unethical conduct includes engaging in or permitting harassment or misconduct towards a student, soliciting or encouraging inappropriate written, verbal, electronic, or physical relationships with a student. Standard 9 handles professional conduct and says unethical conduct includes actions or behaviors or conduct that is detrimental to the health, welfare, discipline, or morals of students. Now, educators are required to report a breach of one or more of the standards in the Code of Ethics for educators no later than 90 days from the date the educator became aware of an alleged incident. An investigator with the commission says the only case they had on Hooker was from April of 2022 in Burke County, meaning it would seem no one from Columbia County reported Hooker's actions in 2017.
What do you think needs to change?
I'm not really sure where it ticks down in the system of what exactly went wrong. All I know is that wherever it did go wrong, it doesn't need to go wrong again.
According to a 2010 report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the lack of oversight allows sexually abusive teachers to quietly move from school to school. On average, one offender passes through 3 different school districts before being stopped and can abuse as many as 73 children in their lifetime.
It's honestly pretty devastating to go through all of this and feel the way that I'm feeling without any backup other than, the people who are on my side and support me in that way. Columbia County hasn't really done their part, nor are they wanting to do their part, and it's just really tough for people in my situation going through that and wanting to come forward and wanting justice for the right things and nobody else wanting justice for you.
Cooksey and her lawyer, Clay Buckhalter, are filing this lawsuit against the Columbia County School District, Scott Hooker, and former Superintendent Sandra Caraway.
I just think in this entire situation, it was a complete failure on the Columbia County school system part.
They're claiming instead of concerning themselves with protecting children, the entire administration did their best to sweep these matters under the rug.
They have been very hesitant to accept that they were wrong and acted wrongly in this whole situation.
We reached out to the Columbia County Board of Education for comment, but we have not heard back. Georgia law allows the district 30 days to respond to the lawsuit.
I'm not going to let it slide, and I'm not going to back down until something is done about it. Something needs to be done. Things need to change. Rules, regulations, mandatory reporting, everything.
Despite her experiences, Cooksey wants to return to the classroom as a teacher.
What does it mean to go through all of this and still want to be a teacher?
After going through this, it pushes me more to want to be one of the good teachers in this world and protect the young children of this world more than anything. So I think there's a little bit more of a passion there now.
Scott Hooker is expected to be in court for his trial on August 21st. In regards to Madison's case, the I-Team will be there and we'll be sure to keep you updated on this entire case.
Okay, so there's just a long snippet, but still just kind of a snippet of all of what's going on here with this case. So, Will, let's go back to the beginning here. When did this get put on your radar? And then we'll go even further back after that. But you heard about this case about a year ago. You know, how did this come to be?
Yeah, so when we first heard about it, it was when Scott Hooker was arrested in Burke County at Burke County High School for, I believe it was sexual contact with a student at the time, sexual battery and simple battery, after he allegedly groped a 15-year-old girl at Burke County High School. And, you know, we looked at that and we said, well, I wonder if there's anyone else connected to this. So, you know, I just started digging, got a little curious about it, and that's when I came across Madison Cooksey's case. We ran into her on Facebook. I reached out to her. I was like, I can't even remember what she posted. It was over a year ago. But I reached out to her and she said, oh yeah, I know who Scott Hooker is. Actually, this is what happened to me back in 2017. And then we started digging. I requested some documents from the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, requested his personnel file from the school district. And that's when we found the police report from Madison's incident in 2017, and then a second incident 2 months after that where she alleges him of continuing that contact with her after that he allegedly sexually assaulted her. So that was when things started to take off, and then quickly after that we got the personnel file where we saw at the very end there were 3 different letters between the principal of Evans High School, the superintendent Sandra Caraway, and Scott Hooker, where there were several incidents that happened and nothing was really done, including one dating back to 2015 at Evans High School where a female student called Hooker an inappropriate name for a teacher and student relationship. Mm-hmm. So that's where it all started, and then we started looking through that, found out that, you know, he had these inappropriate reactions with female students. It was labeled as worrisome, and if it continued to happen, then he could be terminated or further action could be taken. Nothing was done. He was continued to teach at Evans High School while Madison moved to a different school, transferred out, and then, you know, he ended up resigning at the end of the year and was able to go to Richmond County and to a private school, and then on to Burke County, where he was later arrested for what seemed like the same thing.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a second, but just so we have the timeline of kind of his working, like where he worked, his employment status and whatnot. So he was at Evans.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, we have incident number 1 with the student making an inappropriate comment. Fast forward a couple years, that's when we have the Madison Cooksey incident, also at Evans in 2017.
And then 2 months after Madison's incident, deputies are called back again because after that first time with Madison, he was told, hey, Sandra Caraway is like, you're not going to have any physical contact with students beyond your duties as a teacher or anything like that. We want you to stay away from her. Just don't do this, don't do that. 2 months after that, Madison, deputies are called. Madison says, hey, you know, he's been coming into classrooms where I'm at, what seems like on purpose. He's making himself available to my friends. You know, he's staring at me whenever he's around me. So she felt very uncomfortable. And then at that point, that's when she transferred, and he continued to teach until the end of the school year.
Right, and so then after that, so he finishes up that 2017 school year and then leaves Columbia County altogether, goes to Richmond County, and teaches at
the Georgia School for the Classics and Innovation.
Yep.
Innovation in the Classics.
And he's there for
a little over a year.
And then he goes to Burke County.
Correct.
And that's when he gets arrested for another alleged inappropriate relationship, contact, whatever it may be. So this is an incident that's kind of followed him a couple of different places.
Correct.
So you talk to Madison. What's her frustration in this? And I mean, we can kind of gather it, but
yeah.
You know, what's she saying about this whole thing when this happens? Because transferring out is a big step.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of like a last resort step to take. So, you know, in her eyes, what failures were there throughout the time that she made the allegation to her transferring out?
Yeah, I mean, she was just frustrated at the lack of, I guess, people didn't hear her out. You know, it was like, oh, something like that didn't happen. People just didn't believe her. That was a big part of why her case got no-billed by a grand jury the first time is that they felt that there were no witnesses, there wasn't enough evidence to move forward with it. So she really felt like there was no one out there that believed her and believed that this had happened. And then, you know, you see the personnel file, and then he's got a record, there's a paper trail of like his habits of what he's done, and nothing was done to prevent this with Madison, and not only to prevent it with her, but for other people down the road as well, which we saw him eventually get arrested 2 schools later.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to me to think about, was there no report done? Was there no background done as he applies to Richmond County schools, Burke County schools? Were these things just not done?
Well, we talked to the private school in Richmond County. They say that criminal background checks are done, but, you know, at Evans, nothing was reported and nothing criminal had happened. So, I mean, he's innocent at that point. He's not guilty of anything, so that's not going to pop up on a background check. But they can call those school districts to find out about them. But, again, a big part of this was from what I was told, was that, you know, if you ask about him, Columbia County is not going to say, well, he's allegedly done all of these things, and it's going to prevent him from getting another job. Then you have another lawsuit on your hands.
Right.
So that was another big part of this. So it's really a gray area and a tricky situation for these school districts when things like this happen.
Sure, and if I'm a school district and you do any sort of little background and you don't see anything because there's nothing reported, I'm not going to call the school district that had him last and ask if there was anything fishy if you don't find anything. But why weren't these things reported? Surely there has to be some sort of protocol in place that if this type of thing comes up, something as serious as a sexual assault, is there no procedure in place that says you have to report them?
There are procedures in places. That's where you go to the Georgia Commission, or Georgia Ethics and Commission. It's a state organization that overlooks any teacher with a certification to teach in the state. That includes the superintendents as well. There's mandatory reporting. There's a code of ethics with standards in there that says certain relationships with students, you can't hurt the welfare, well-being of the students. So I believe it was Standard 2 and Standard 9 in that, if you have a chance to go look it up. It was also in the story, as you saw. Those were 2 of the key points that stuck out because Hooker seemed to have violated those 2 standards in there in the Code of Ethics, which would violate his certification and put it into question where an investigation needed to be done. And then you go look to see if anything was reported, and the only thing the investigator told me was from 2022 when he was at Burke County. So he told me it seemed like nothing was done with Columbia County Schools in terms of that reporting. They have a mandatory reporting period. It's like 3 different steps. I think it's 24 hours, and then it's a week, and then it's 90 days to report that. And that's any teacher, including Scott Hooker. So if he doesn't report that behavior himself, he is in violation of the Code of Ethics.
Right, and then is that, what can be done if you violate that? What's kind of the punishment for that?
You can lose your certification. You can be suspended for a certain amount of time as well, up to 3 years as well. So there's different things that they can do, and they can come back and do even if you're not a teacher to make sure that you're not doing that. But I asked him, one of the investigators, when we first did the story, I was like, what are you guys supposed to do if no one reports this? And they're like, it's hard to do anything we don't know about. I was like, that seems like a problem.
Yeah.
Because then if the school district doesn't want to report it, then they don't want to report it.
Right.
And there's no way that the commission is going to even know that happens. And, even if his case, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't reported. So, I asked him, I was like, if, they have an investigation, they decide that they need to be, or go through an investigation process, and then I don't even know what they called it anymore, to be honest with you. They go through a system where they judge them on it, and then it can be expunged from your record. And I was like, well, if it's expunged, would you guys still have it on your record? And they're like, yes, it'll still be on there. And they still didn't have it. So
right. So
it was never
reported. Just never got reported. Let's talk about Madison for a second, because a lot of the key players in this story are gone. Dr. Sandra Caraway, no longer at Columbia County Schools. The Evans principal, no longer at Evans. Scott Hooker, obviously, no longer at Evans. Madison Cooksey, no longer at Evans. But she says she's not letting this go. We heard that in the story at the end. She's not letting this go. Why is it so important to her to continue to fight for this, even though so many of the people involved, pretty much all the people involved, have since left Evans?
I think the biggest thing was, and it was a quick little part in there that's really important in the story, is that that government report that came out from 2010 was why she's not going to let this go, was that, you know, we saw a real life example of that investigation, of that report that says, you know, one, quote, sexually abusive teacher can go quietly from school district to school district without any consequences, and they can get through at least 3 different schools before being stopped and abuse as many as 73 students, children, in their lifetime. And you know, we see that Scott Hooker went through 3 different school districts before he was arrested, and you know, I think it's important to talk about the fact that he was a special education teacher and was working around students who are the most vulnerable in the school districts. So some of them may not know what's wrong. Some of them may not be able to express that. That was one thing Madison told me as an observation, was that you really don't know who may or may not allegedly be a victim of what happened. So that was a big part of it, and she wanted to return back to the classroom as kind of like a wake-up call for her, to be that light in the community, to be that mentor to children, and make sure that things go correctly in the school system.
Yeah, and that was something that Hallie and I had talked about when it came to the Corey Rollins case and some of his alleged victims, and them being even younger than Cooksey. You know, she was a high schooler at the time. I don't remember exactly how old
16,
Corey Rollins' victims were, though. I think they were like 8, maybe, give or take, that age. And it can be very hard for kids to come forward and express that. And, you know, you think of a high schooler, you know, 16-year-old girl, if you speak out against a teacher and all of a sudden you're the central focus of school and you've got to transfer, that's a lot for a 16-year-old. It's easy for us to sit here and say, you know, that's the right thing to do, but put yourself back in the high schooler's shoes. That's not an easy thing.
Yeah, or just not even high school, but I mean, a lot of people, like grown adults, you know, it takes a lot for someone to come out and to express what happened to them, especially if it's allegedly a sexual assault case or sexual abuse. You know, I get a lot of messages from people saying, I can't believe how strong she was through this entire thing to share that story and to stand up. I mean, it takes a lot to do that, and it's a lot of courage too.
Yeah, and that's something I definitely don't want to sweep under the rug, is, you know, we applaud her for speaking up and coming forward, because it's not easy to put your face on a story like this. And you know, we know there are more alleged victims out there, whether they be the Burke County or the other Evans High School students. And so for her to kind of be a face to them sheds more light on this story than it may have otherwise gotten had she not come forward. So again, we give her a lot of credit for coming forward and doing that.
Yeah, I mean, she's told me to not to name any names or anything like that, but I mean, she's had plenty of people message her, she told me, and come forward and say that they may or may not have been a victim in this case as well. So a lot of moving parts, maybe more to come out, who knows, but
yeah,
definitely important.
Yeah, and so that was kind of my next question. Where do we go from here? I know this is obviously far from over. Where are we at right now? I know we've got a trial coming up, you know, or an important date coming up. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so we're still waiting on Scott Hooker's trial to take place. I think it's been rescheduled twice. Not unusual with jury trials, you know, calendars move. Some cases don't make the calendar call. So it's been moved twice. It's had a specially assigned date of August 21st from what we understand. So that's the date that we're looking at. We will be there for that date. But in the meantime, as you guys have heard over the last 2 days, a new lawsuit has been filed by Cooksey, her family, and then her attorney as well against Scott Hooker, the school district, and former superintendent Sandra Caraway. From what I understand, they are asking for $20 million in damages. I know the lawsuit does say at least $70,000 just to walk away, but that's to get it out of small claims court, to get it up into Superior Court. But they're leaving this really open-ended to the jurors to decide how much the damages are in this case. So her lawyer Clay has told me that the school district is unwilling to take any responsibility in this case, and they're not willing to sit down and negotiate any kind of settlement. So we'll really see where that goes. We'll see where the trial goes. If it even gets to that point, there may be he may plead guilty, he may still stick with not guilty at that point. So there's still a lot to come out with this.
Right. So obviously Scott Hooker, a main defendant on there, and then Sandra Caraway in the school district. Is that just for the lack of reporting?
Yes, that's strictly for the fact of they knew what was going on and still allowed this to happen and allowed him to move to 2 other school districts knowing what happened as well.
Right. And I think another piece that I wanted to hit on that you heard there at the end, you briefly mentioned it here, is after all this, Cooksey still wants to teach. She still wants to get back into school and be a leader for kids moving forward. Why was that so important for her?
She just wanted to be that mentor to a lot of different kids and make sure that things were done right. That's really the reason that she said that, pretty much it. So.
Yeah. And again, commending the bravery. It's very easy to, be traumatized by something like that, step away from a school and not want to go back.
Yeah, she said, and it's definitely full circle for her. And that's one thing she talked about, is that she's glad that she can, overcome this, talk about her experiences, and then hopefully teach others about it too.
Yeah. So again, was there anything else that you wanted to put out about the story we should know before we go ahead and play this interview?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
I'm looking right now.
Yeah, and if you want to look too, you can go to our website, WRDW.com. There is an iTeam Investigates tab at the top. You see it there in the top center, iTeam Investigates. If you were to click on that, that'll show you all of our iTeam investigations. And then this one from Will is going to be the top one there because obviously it just ran yesterday. If you scroll down, or actually right here, you can see the earlier stories on this one. So this isn't the first story we've done. It's not the last story we're going to do. And then shows you all of the earlier stories that we've done, the investigations, just kind of the follow-ups and whatnot on that. So
yeah,
that's
we've been to all the court dates and everything like that. I mean, we've got all the updates. There's been 6 or 7 stories done on this, so we've been on top of it.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to follow it as well.
Yeah, and again, so the next big date, August 21st,
yes.
You said, is the trial for Scott Hooker. So we'll be there for that, and we'll, of course, let you guys know what comes out of it. But for right now, we will play the full interview here from Madison Cooksey that Will did the other day. So that runs about 15 minutes if you want to stick around for that. That should take us right up to about 15 minutes till our midday newscast. So, of course, download the streaming app, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that fun stuff that I normally say at the end of these. Will, we do appreciate the time, and looking forward to seeing the future investigations that you do on this. So, yeah, here we go. We'll play this, and that's it for us on the News 12 Now desk. After this, I'll see you back here Monday. I was going to say tomorrow. Won't be here tomorrow.
You sure you don't want to work tomorrow?
Nope, I'm good. I'm all set for tomorrow. Monday, though, Monday's top headlines. Have a great weekend. If you're going out to do any of the fun activities we got, enjoy them. Thunder over Evans, Food Truck Friday. Got something in North Augusta, too. I forget what it is. Golf. You're going out to play a little bit of golf.
For us.
Yeah, yep. Be there at Applewood on Sunday if you say hi. Anyway, all right, here's the interview.
Just tell me, how has the last year been for you so far?
It's been difficult. It's been long waiting for all of this to kind of get settled and seeing where it's all going.
What's been the process and what's it been like going through all of this for the past year?
So for the past year, there have been multiple court dates where I've shown up and neither him or his attorney will show up, or it will be him and not his attorney. And it's just really hard going and being there knowing that you're there and you're making the effort to want to get all of this resolved and nobody else, even in the courtroom, really cares to get it resolved. It's a little disheartening.
And I know we've talked about this so many times, but what are your feelings towards Columbia County and the way they handled this entire situation?
It's honestly pretty devastating to go through all of this and feel the way that I'm feeling without any backup other than, the people who are on my side and support me in that way. Columbia County hasn't really done their part, nor are they wanting to do their part. And it's just really tough for people in my situation going through that and wanting to come forward and wanting justice for the right things and nobody else wanting justice for you.
And we were there when you went in front of the Columbia County Commission. Were they trying to prevent you from doing that in any way that you know of?
Oh, absolutely. I got a call that morning of the meeting saying that, you know, we should just handle this internally. We just want to know what you're talking about before you go up there. And even when I got there, they were saying, oh, well, you know, you showed up a couple of minutes late, even though I wasn't late. I just didn't know where to go. So they tried to prevent me from doing that. And even when I did go up there to speak, they just kind of didn't really acknowledge me in any kind of way. Even afterwards, one of the board members actually was in a group that I was talking to and didn't even recognize that I was even in the group. And I had just went up in front of him.
And I want to go back, because this will be a full scope story of just about everything that's happened so far. I know we've talked about this, but going back to when all of this happened, what was 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago. So going back to 5 years ago, if you can put yourself in that position, what was it like going through that when all of this had happened?
Honestly, the trauma's kind of blocked out most of it. I just remember, you know, my best friend at the time coming in and helping me through it. You know, one minute I was in class, the next minute I'm in the office surrounded by police officers and my mom. And it's just a really surreal feeling knowing that one minute you're supposed to be in this safe environment teaching or learning from your teachers, and the next minute your whole life just kind of changes.
And you go to school thinking that it's a place where, you know, these grown-ups, these adults are supposed to be taking care of you, looking after you.
Right. I mean, you always hear about, you know, stranger danger, you want to be careful of your surroundings, but like at school you don't really have that guard up because there's not supposed to be any harm in the school. These people are there to protect you. These people are put in place to be your guardians at that moment, not to take advantage of you.
And when we did our story about Scott Hooker's personnel file, and I can't remember if you were aware of everything that happened or that was in that report, but just when that information started coming out about how the situation was handled, how your situation was handled, how Sandra Caraway, the superintendent at the time, didn't really say anything, was like, hey, just don't do that. What are your thoughts and opinions on the way that they handled the situation at that time that it happened?
It's very, very mind-blowing that all of these things, even before my situation had happened, and it was just kind of, oh, you shouldn't do that, let's not do that anymore, that's not appropriate, instead of actions being taken in place to prevent things like this from happening again. It's mind-blowing that he was able to, one, continue teaching there, two, not really get in trouble even after the situation, and then three, go on to multiple different schools and do the same thing. I just can't even put into words how it makes me feel knowing that that was able to happen, and who knows how many other than me and the other girl who was involved who could have been a victim of his. It's ridiculous.
And you had to leave. You left the school. He stayed there.
He stayed,
teaching.
yes. I pretty sure I was homebound for about a month and a half to 2 months. My mom would go and pick up my schoolwork. He was allowed to go back a couple of days after, continue teaching the special education children that he was teaching, which breaks my heart because who knows, even in that classroom, what went down. They can't stick up for themselves. They can't defend themselves most of the time. So that just disgusts me in one.
Or they don't know what's wrong in the first place.
Right, they don't know the difference between right and wrong. So that's just disgusting. And then even after I returned to school, it was just a constant fear of looking over my shoulder, him coming into my classrooms to talk to my teachers about stuff that wasn't even relevant just because he knew I was in the class, or following me in the hallways, just enough to push me out of the school. And him able to resign peacefully and say, oh, well, I quit, and y'all just move on with your lives and have a great day. Like,
and that's a big part of this, and why we're looking into this, is the fact that he resigned and was able to go to 2 other school systems, one of which he was arrested for doing almost the same thing.
right.
What do you think needs to change?
I'm not really sure where it ticks down in the system of what exactly went wrong. All I know is that wherever it did go wrong, it doesn't need to go wrong again.
And a lot of these school systems are really, I guess you could say, they have a process of self-reporting to the ethics board.
Right.
Seems a bit controversial, right?
Right. You're supposed to do this, and that would have prevented him from going to any other school, possibly revoking his teaching license, to do this again, and y'all failed to do that.
And if Columbia County never reports it, then the state never knows about it.
Right.
Seems like an issue. Seems like a problem.
Right.
What are your goals? What do you hope to do moving forward?
Moving forward, I hope to use this time right now to just focus on my family. And before all this happened, you know, or during the process of this all happening, in high school I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach kindergarten or first grade. And I think after some thought and after going through all this, I think I would like to go back to school and be a teacher.
What does it mean to go through all of this and still want to be a teacher?
After going through this, it pushes me more to want to be one of the good teachers in this world and protect the young children of this world more than anything. So I think there's a little bit more of a passion there now.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure that a lot of the teachers were, I mean, I'm sure they were aware of the situation after it had happened. And I think most of my teachers that I had classes with after that situation were very weary of the situation, but a lot of them, I would say, just like the students, kind of didn't believe me in that situation. I know the teacher that I initially reported the incident to, she was one of his really good friends. So initially when I had told her, she kind of laughed it off. Like, that didn't happen. Why are you out in this hallway crying? That shouldn't, get back in class. Like, it was just one of those kind of things. But after it all happened and after everything came out on the news, I actually had a couple of my teachers respond and message me personally saying, I remember this happening. I remember what you're talking about him coming into our classrooms, and I'm so sorry, like, I didn't protect you in that moment. And so I don't think that a lot of them knew that I was being very truthful in that moment, and I was really vulnerable in that moment, and they didn't really take me seriously. But I think now, especially the ones that have messaged me and have apologized, they really do care.
And what's it like being in that moment where you're vulnerable and it feels like no one believes you?
It's hard. It's really, really hard. I think that's one of the toughest feelings that I've had to deal with in life is I'm always going to need to protect myself. There are people out there who are going to protect me, but I'm my number one protector, and I think I had to learn that at a very young age in that situation. And it's hard when you feel like you don't have anybody to turn to, especially in a school where, like I said, people are supposed to protect you. These people are supposed to believe you. I can see the teenage kids in the school picking on me, sending me mean messages and all of that. But for the teachers to not step up in that moment just really hurt.
And I remember my question during all of that. What's your message to someone who may be going through something similar as you went through?
Don't give up. Don't just let it, don't push it away. I tried for 5 years to just let it under the rug. Just sweep it under the rug. You don't think about it, you don't feel it. And eventually, in small ways, it will come out. You'll feel that anxiety, you'll feel that sadness, you'll feel all of these emotions. Just talk to somebody. You have your family, and if you don't have your family, well, y'all know my name, you can reach out to me. I will talk to you. But you always have somebody to talk to, whether you feel like that in that moment you don't, there's somebody out there that is going to help you in that moment, and you just shouldn't push it down and push it down and push it down. It's just not healthy. And I hope by doing this and pushing the Columbia County system and pushing at all these matters that need to be fixed, hopefully women won't have to feel like this in the future, and the system can change and it will be easier for women down the road. I think in his mentality, and I don't even want to go into his mentality, but the only way that I can think about it is even afterwards there were a bunch of hate, but there was also the very few other girls in the school who did come to me and say, you know, he did say nasty things to me too. He did make me feel uncomfortable in some way, like this and that and this and that. I think one of the reasons that I was kind of picked was because in the beginning I knew something was wrong. I had a gut feeling that I couldn't shake and I didn't like him for whatever reason. And obviously, you know, being a 16-year-old girl in a school, I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just like I'm just overreacting. And I just remember him really trying to pry that friendship open, really trying to push those walls down to build my trust up. And I think once I did kind of shake that feeling that I shouldn't have shook, that's when it all happened. And I don't think it would have just been me. I think if it had been anybody else in that moment, or maybe somebody else had let their guard down, I think maybe it would have happened to somebody else. But unfortunately, it just so happened to be me. I'm glad it wasn't anybody else, but I think that's just his mentality. I think that's just the way that he is. I just don't think that he can control himself. I mean, I have no idea how many more girls I know that I have people who want to stay anonymous in my messages saying, you know, I've had something happen to me. They either don't want to go into detail of it or they just want me to know that I'm not the only one. I think there are more out there, and I think if they're comfortable or if they want to share what happened, I hoped that when I did these interviews the first couple of times that it would have pushed them to come out more. But I think if the victims of his, if there are more out there, if they would come forward, it would help a lot. It would build more against him. It would prove a pattern. It would prove a lot more. And I do think that they are out there. Like I said, regular adolescent children, like people who with special needs, people with learning disabilities, vulnerable people. He has been able to pry his way into vulnerable people's lives, and it baffles me that after everything that, you know, you left Evans and the next school didn't call and talk to anybody and see, you know, why he left or what happened and so on and so on. It just, I don't know how to feel about it.
This is bigger than
He's
just
like a
our
roach.
local school systems.
Yeah, he's like a roach just going in and out of the vent system of every school county around here.
That's crazy.
It's ridiculous. Well, and you would think that after all this, you know, it's been a year. It's been court case after court case and, you know, filing a lawsuit. You would think that, you know, these people who are in the position to change things wouldn't be like, hey, she's not going to stop. She's not going to just let this slide. I'm not going to let it slide, and I'm not going to back down until something is done about it. Something needs to be done. Things need to change. Rules, regulations, mandatory reporting, everything. Whether that be, you know, talks in school about, you know, the dangers of people around you, not only strangers but everybody. Educating children on, you know, what it's like to be groomed and to know the signs of it, because if I would have known the signs, I probably would have been like, you know, ding in my head, like, this isn't right. This is not how it's supposed to be. Whether we need to educate the adults on it, whether anything needs to be changed. I can't. It makes me mad.
That's fine.
It makes me mad.
I
just want to shake the superintendent's head. Like,
you good? Do you have anything else? No?
nah.
That's it. All right. Cool. I appreciate it.